bring to the stage Debbie Wildrick. She's the Chief Strategy Officer at MetaBrand. She's Sales, Marketing, and Operations Executive and Channel Strategy Specialist in the CPG industry with over 30 years experience, including leadership roles at 7-Eleven and PepsiCo. She's going to be talking about considering retail channel strategy. Debbie, welcome.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. So glad, as usual, to be here and talking in front of all of you. It's great to have a chance to really talk to the spirit of the entrepreneurial engagement. I, too, have been in the industry for a long time, and it's quite often that I tell Jeff Kleinman, Jeff, you know, I can talk on other things besides channel strategies. And sure enough, I get asked to come again and talk on channel strategies, but I can tell you that channel strategies is my heart, and it's what really is going to be critical for you to make the decisions that you're going to make around your beverage launch. So it is a very, very important topic. And what makes me qualified to do that, I, like Jim, am celebrating several years in this industry. And I was thinking as I was listening to him that in 1979, and I call this my pre-sales career, I went to work for, and this is really aging me, the great A&P Tea Company in Indianapolis, Indiana, which was our central region office, and we had 300 stores. And that was because my in-laws had spent their life, they were lifers in retail. And A&P was the #1 chain in the country back then, by the way. And it was from there that I actually eventually went into sales. And my first job as a sales rep was working for a very large food broker in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. We had coverage, what we called, I was calling on the Kroger stores in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and we had coverage, what we called wall-to-wall. So we had big, major brands on every single aisle in the grocery store, including frozen and refrigerated. And it's with that that I began to grow my career and to really focus on where I think it all happens, which is at retail. If we're not managing and looking at what we expect, if we're not inspecting what we expect, once we get on the shelf, then we don't have really a great chance of moving off that shelf. And that's really a lot of what has to do with channel strategies. I then went to work for 7-Eleven, and it was post 7-Eleven. I actually ran all of beverages eventually for 7-Eleven, which was a great, great career. And when I was working for my first startup beverage company, I had a friend of mine at Coca-Cola who was helping me decide what I was going to do next. And he said, you know, Debbie, he said, you're unlike most people in this industry. You have both sides of the desk. You have the ability to understand what it takes to be a retailer and to make decisions on what products will move off the shelf and into consumers' mouths. At the same time, you've also worked on the manufacturer side, and so you are a channel strategy expert. So today, I'm branded a channel strategy expert. So let's get into what that means. First of all, a marketing channel is the people, organizations, and activities necessary to transfer the ownership of goods from the point of production to the point of consumption. It is the way products and services get to the end user. The consumer, the way that they get to the consumer, and it's also known as a distribution channel. Now, I like to say that I coined this phrase, but what you will do every time you think about the consumer and consumption and every decision that you make around your products, whether it's the label, whether it's where you're positioned on the shelf, it's all about, does it drive consumer purchase behavior? Does it drive the consumer to purchase your product? So every single decision you make will be about this point of consumption. And a distribution channel strategy enables you to sell to customers in geographic areas or market sectors that you direct your sales or your direct sales team cannot reach. And you can choose from a number of different distribution strategies. So that's wholesalers, retailers, distributors, and the internet. And I know that you're going to learn a lot about that this afternoon from our friends at LA Libations, who will talk to you specifically about the toolkit. But this is what it's really all about, is getting our products into distribution. And so first of all, by clearly defining our target market, the consumer, you will determine how to sell. What does that mean? It means your points of differentiation. It's your value proposition. It's your pricing strategy, which, by the way, pricing does define your element or your level in a particular category. So am I a premium product? Even if I can manufacture my products for a certain amount of cost of goods, I still want to price my products according to where I want to fit within a particular category. And marketing tactics. So how do we sell? Those are the four critical areas of market, or how to sell. And then where to sell. And where to sell is what we're going to talk about today. Channel mix and that strategy. Category positioning and shelf positioning. Geographic plan, your distribution plan, and your sales team strategy. And while we won't get into those last three areas, we're going to talk about channels today. It's very important to think about how your strategies really are affected by these particular areas. So when we think about selling beverages, these are the channels that we can sell beverages in. And on the left-hand side in blue are the channels that we call take-home channels or take-home packages. And they traditionally are outlets that have higher volume per outlet. So we're talking about packages that are multi-packs, multi-serve, and they go home into our pantries. And then there is the single-serve immediate consumption retailers. And those, of course, are in yellow. And those are exactly what they say. I'm going to consume immediately. So if I go into a C-store, I'm probably buying that beverage and drinking it in my car or taking it to the office with me, but immediately consuming it. If I go into a restaurant, I'm obviously consuming it on premise. But the difference between immediate consumption and take home is that it's a different consumer, it's a different consumption activity. And then there's the middle channels here that really they cross over both areas. So certainly C-store is clearly an immediate consumption place. And C-store is known as what we call a destination for beverages. And what does that mean? That means that before I even go in the front door of that retailer, I know that I want a beverage. I know that I'm thirsty. Now, drug has tried to be the C-store for women, and they have very robust what we call vault sections or cooler door sections. However, not necessarily where they sell most of their business. They do a lot of multi-pack and take-home business as well, but all in all, drug is not necessarily where you're going to drive your beverage sales. And then natural specialty, which is one of the retailers, and when we're going to talk about a case study in a few minutes here between grocery and C-store. And when I talk about grocery, I'm talking about natural specialty as well, although there are some dynamics between natural specialty. The biggest thing about natural specialty is that they have become really robust. Let's take Whole Foods as an example. They've become really robust about eat-in consumption. So Whole Foods has a place that you can actually, in most of their stores, you can actually eat in your lunch and your dinner if you so choose. So it's a little bit different than that. I may buy a beverage in that particular retailer that I'm going to consume immediately. Oh, and by the way, then there's the internet, which I had down at the bottom, which crosses over all channels, right? And oh my God, Amazon gobbles up Whole Foods. So what does that mean? I swear if I have one more person say to me, which happens on almost a daily basis, well, you know, Amazon bought Whole Foods. You know, well, okay. What does that mean? First of all, Amazon knows nothing about brick and mortar. And Whole Foods, ironically, has been a retailer that has been very successful and knows nothing about the internet. As a matter of fact, the only way that you can have your Whole Foods delivered to your home is through Instacart. So, you know, they haven't done anything with regard to internet. But hold on, folks, because it's still all about the experience. Who here is a foodie and loves to shop Whole Foods? Yeah. I mean, it's an experience, and we don't necessarily think of Amazon and online changing. Plus, grocery is the one product category with the highest percentage of shoppers both preferring to research, 53%, and purchase, 70% at the store. We do see a lot of research going on the internet these days, but still, it's primarily happening at the store. 53% of shoppers globally prefer to do their research for grocery purchases in store. Of those who choose to research online, 10% prefer to do so via their PC, 8% by mobile and smartphone, and 5% by tablet. And then same thing with the 70% of grocery or consumers actually shopping in the store. And what does this really mean when we think about marketing? And we hear a lot of buzz about all these things that are happening, especially with the millennials and using our phones. It's important to understand that we're still shoppers in the grocery channel. On average, consumers also shop at 2 to 3 channels right now for any particular product. And I can remember back in 2010 that we actually were talking about the fact that the consumer was shopping, they could buy aspirin at 7 different channels. So it's important to note that not only do we shop at traditional supermarkets and supercenters, but we also can buy some of the same things, and we're looking at the other types of retailers at the same time for different types of products: discount, convenience, club, and e-commerce. Large supermarkets and hypermarkets account for 51% of global sales, but smaller formats are growing at a faster rate, according to Nielsen. Now, what's really happening, and that's why natural specialty and this whole experiential aspect of channel shopping, is that our stores are getting smaller once again, and we're shopping the perimeter of the stores. And we're still desiring that experience. Low price, great taste, and convenience are no longer enough to capture the grocery shopping dollars. So while Whole Foods really needed to drop their pricing because they were known as the whole paycheck, that decision was made long before Amazon purchased them, and they were working towards that. But it's still, you know, we don't necessarily want to shop and get gouged, as we like to think, but certainly price is not our biggest factor for how we choose our shopping experiences. The differences between channels, now there's all kinds of differences. Category sales, you know, how much does one channel sell in beer versus another channel, as an example. Your volume per outlet. When I talked about drug is very low in volume per outlet. That's why you've got 8,000 drugstores owned by Walgreens, but the volume per outlet is much lower. Consumer, what are their purchase patterns and their demographics? So back to talking about take home versus immediate consumption. That's very critical to how you launch your products and make your decisions as it relates to why the consumer is purchasing your product at a particular time. The promotional strategies and types of marketing, just like we talked, mobile's important. We want to be marketing with mobile. It's inexpensive, but is it the primary place where we're making our decisions? Managing our cost of entry and the decision around timing, managing your SKUs and your space location, and the distribution to their stores. So let's look at a couple of comparisons. And like I said, when we're talking about grocery, I'm including natural specialty, those are grocery stores, and C-store. And I'll be happy to answer other questions about the other channels of trade, certainly over the next couple of days, but these are the primary channels that you'll be looking at as you launch your beverage. And so again, grocery is take home, it's food to prepare versus prepared food. The consumer is changing in that it is both male and female because of the shared responsibilities that are happening in the household. It's fewer trips per week, and the shopping trips are one of the most basic elements of consumer behavior. So difference between grocery, and the reason I bring this up, and my friends in the industry have been talking about DSD and cooler doors in grocery for a long time. It is not where your consumer is buying their products in beverages. So if I'm thirsty at the check stand, I might pick up something out of that cooler, but it's not where you're gonna get your volume. And anybody in this industry who tells you, you gotta be in cold in the grocery store, talk to me instead. Okay, and then C-store, the opposite of what happens, immediate consumption, single purchases, traditional mail, but that's changing too, heavy users and multiple trips per week, and food service and packaged beverages are number 1 and number 2. So when I talk about food service being number 1, that means fountain drinks and frozen drinks. The 2 channels, volume per outlet, well, the grocery channel is $668 billion today, 38,000 outlets, little over 17 million per outlet in business, about 38,000 SKUs, 41,000 square feet, and an average transaction size of $30. In contrast, the C-store industry is $550 billion, but $223 billion of that is food and merchandise sales, 154,000 outlets, and about $1.5 million in sales per outlet. The average SKUs are somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000, and the average transaction size is $5 to $8. Now, why do I say all this? Well, first of all, and I give a whole talk on, it only takes 1 unit a day to stay on the shelf in a convenience store. But, and most entrepreneurs, even when I was at 7-Eleven and I'd tell them that, they'd say, oh, that's no problem. Yes, it is a problem, okay? Because I've only got about 1,000 customers a day coming in. And if 40% of those customers come in to buy a beverage, whether it's food service or packaged, think about how many beverages I'm going to sell per day. So it is, and it's important to us to understand when we think about our channel strategies, how can we get ourselves on the shelf, and how do we position ourselves to make sure that the retailer is going to buy into the fact that if they put my product in this particular configuration on the shelf in this position, then they will achieve incremental category sales. That's what it's all about, and certainly it will move off the shelf. But there's not a lot of room for us. There's not a lot of room in our stores. Average margins for grocery is the mid-30s. That means that the grocery retailer makes on average about 35 to 38%, and that's lower if it's a multi-pack. Average margins for C-store are low to mid-40s, and so when you think about your cost of goods and your viable business models and how you get to market and where you ought to price your products, it's important to understand the retailer margin, and they differ even in those other retailers too, which I can talk about separately. As far as promotional strategies and types of marketing, it's everyday low price versus a high-low, and that's as it relates to promotional spending. Now, Mark, what you'll have in the early days of selling in your new brand, you'll try and you'll go out and you'll sell to retailers and they'll say, well, what's your marketing support? How are you going to drive it off the shelf? You know what, retailer? I don't have any way to drive it, don't say that, by the way, but I don't have any way to drive it off the shelf, because what happens in the early stage of my brand is that I haven't built that yet. And the only way that I can move it off the shelf is that if you will help me promote this product and if I've got the right messaging on the front of that bottle. Because 80% of the decisions are made right there. And so I'm not driving anybody into your stores to buy my product. Like I said, again, don't say those words, but you get my point. Okay, and so the promotions and the marketings are a little bit different. With C-Store, there's a lot of twofers, there's a lot of opportunities to sell things like buy one, get one free that don't necessarily always happen in grocery, but not gonna go through all of this detail here. And then slotting, which is your entry fee into the marketplace. And for grocery, it does vary, and it does vary by areas of the country. The Northeast happens to be some of the most ridiculously expensive markets to go into. Traditionally, natural specialty has not necessarily had slotting or required slotting, so it's a great place to go in. And then traditionally, for the most part, C-Store is always going to be a free case per store, allocated back through a bill back. So it's all varying, but we do have to pay to get on the shelf. The most important thing is that if you're going to pay, that you need to really work with your retailers and partner with them and understand what their commitment is for that payment. Where am I going to be placed on the shelf, which you're telling them, by the way, based on your strategies, and how long am I going to be there, and what are my requirements for staying on the shelf, all of those things before we just point blank, paper slotting. And then, space, location, we do still sell a lot of single serve, and especially when we're in a new brand. If we go into a grocery retailer, and you can look at the shelves, there's all kinds of single serve, shelf-stable products in the grocery store. It's because we're a new brand and the consumer's not necessarily willing or ready yet to commit to a multi-pack. But we're definitely selling, in the single-serve locations as well, in aisle with other beverages, and we're preparing ourselves to be ready with multi-packs. Whereas in the C-Store channel, it is much simpler, single-serve, 3 to 4 of your best SKUs, location within your segment. And then the differences between distributors versus wholesalers, and I see that I'm starting to run out of time, just like the rest of us did up here, but there is a difference between going DSD versus going the direct model. And I'm a big proponent today of even hybrid models, but also, it's not all about DSD. So when you hear two of the largest beverage companies in the world, actually Gatorade and Nestle Waters brands, went to market in the direct model and became very successful. And so, but there are differences and there are reasons to be there. And the product in the DSD environment is it's delivered straight to the shelf. Whereas in a direct model, it actually comes in through a wholesaler and it comes in the back door, and then it's the responsibility of the store personnel to take it to the shelf. So those are the biggest differences. Now we think, okay, so DSD does our merchandising for us. This is pretty much, with the exception of the New York metropolitan market, this is a chain-driven business with schematics and places on the shelf and locations And regardless of what your method of distribution is, the placement happens according to the way that you've strategically built your business and presented to the retailer. Just a little piece on refreshment beverages are really the biggest opportunity is natural specialty because they are the best channel for innovation today. That remains. And then the evolution of strategic plan. The lack of understanding of your volume potential can cause big mistakes in planning, and especially in the beginning. And that's a whole nother presentation. But matching your product to the retailer strategy is really critical, as I mentioned right at the first of the presentation. And marketing decisions, and certainly laying out your plan and then executing your plan. So just a quick, actually, this is about category positioning and shelf, but where you want to be, bottom line, is you want to be positioned where your customers go to look when they are making a decision to purchase a beverage. And so that could depend on what your beverage is like, but you don't want to not be where other beverages are sold because you want them to be making selection about your beverage as well. So this will help. This is a quick little, I just got a couple more minutes. I got 2 store tours for you. And this is store tour number 1. Now, I thought that I could really blast conventional retail with a store tour, but no, this is one of our leading natural products stores. And so first of all, I go over to the dairy section. Of course, I can buy my single-serve dairy milk, and right next to that is what we would call the refrigerated section, where we have all these fresh juices. And that's great, I've got that opportunity to sell that. And so then I continue to walk through the store and I get to the alternative milk section that's shelf stable. That's on another aisle. And then this aisle, which has shelf stable beverages like Izzy, sparkling carbonated soft drinks, what we would have called carbonated soft drinks, waters, and energy drinks, well, that's all on one aisle. That's our shelf-stable aisle. I don't know if you've noticed, we're missing a few things here, though. This is shelf-stable juice. And this is ready-to-drink tea. Now, that sounds great. It's right next to the boxed tea. So that's where I'm going to find it, right? You notice that I've gone to several different aisles to shop for a beverage. And where are the protein drinks? I literally had to ask, and this is my home store, by the way, that I shop in every week. Oh, they're in the nutritional bar section. And then, of course, we do have our traditional beverages at the check stand, and fortunate to have some of these brands in those check stands. Now, store number 2. I got into this store by accident, and this is all about my passion, folks, because not only am I a retailer at heart, but I also believe that today's retailers need to get it figured out. And I happened into a store, which is a upscale King Superstore, which is now owned by Kroger, by the way, in Denver, where I live. And lo and behold, they've got one of these store formats. They're doing it right. They've got this end cap with LaCroix, and you'll be able to see a little bit more of the aisle, but they got the ice down on that end. This store, I can find my beverages, whether they're refrigerated, shelf stable, whether they're alcohol, non-alcohol, all in the same place. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and you can see the aisles there. Then I've even got a way to fill my water up. I've got another end cap display, all in the same section. Here's my shelf-stable, ready-to-drink sports drinks and teas and so forth. And that's at its best, folks. That's merchandising evolution, and if we all have the opportunity to understand how our stores and our retailers are merchandising, then we're going to have a much better chance of figuring out how to move our beverages off our shelves. Thanks.
Great, and right before we go to break, does anyone have any questions? First of all, thanks, Debbie, it was a great presentation. Anyone have any questions?
Great presentation.
Thank you.
As far as destinations, are they changing in your eyes, so whether, as far as with the new drinks coming out, compared to the sparkling business of years ago?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I use the term destination with regard to convenience because it's how we think about what drives consumption. But one of the things that I didn't talk about, which is not directly answering your question, but I saw a great presentation about the internet and about convenience. And one of the things that we cannot solve for with regard to online or Amazon is that if we're hungry or thirsty. So yeah, destinations are definitely changing, and they will move more towards this idea that we can get something immediately for when we're thirsty or we're hungry.
Great, thanks. Any other questions?
I have a question.
No, sure.
Thank you. Love the presentation as well.
Thank
Being
you.
from Colorado and understand the cannabis for the CBD market, where do you see that coming? I'm in it.
Well, I'm in it too, let me tell you. So I think that it is going to be one of the biggest things that we will see. I still think that we've got a lot of roller coaster type steps to get through with regard to the FDA, with regard to the DEA, with regard to really being able to bring such a fantastic ingredient to our consumer base and being able to get it to the masses is still an uphill battle, but we're working very, very quickly towards that, and hopefully we won't have anything that gets in the way, that it'll continue to get better instead of worse as it relates to regulation. Yeah.
When you look at direct versus DSD, how do brokers play in that whole model? Like
Yeah,
the
so-
traditional natural store brokers.
Yeah, and on my slide, which you guys all get these slides, by the way, I do speak to that. I just was running out of time. But so traditionally, we use brokers when we're talking about the direct model because the brokers don't take title of the goods and they sell in and present to the chain accounts. Today, you've seen some increase in using brokers for DSD also. Traditionally, because the margins are so much higher, so if I buy a case of product for distribution, then I'm going to add 25 to 35% on top of that to pay for my distribution. And so traditionally, we've understood that we have to hire our own sales team to work with those distributors to drive that business, and that a broker and the extra 5% is just not the best way to go to market in that particular instance. But then on the other hand, of course, you're really better using brokers, especially as you go through your first year of distribution, you build your presence in your proof of concept market, then you can really talk to your teams about how to move it forward, and brokers become a huge asset for you. And I spent my whole life managing brokers, so.
All right, great. Well, we're going to keep things moving along. We're going to have a short break. Thanks again, Debbie, for a wonderful presentation. We'll meet back here at 2 p.m.